For my senior project, I wrote a guide on the uses of common plants in northern New England. And if you want to see it, it's on display in the library right now, so you can check it out later on. So my interest in plant uses really came from my own personal health and hobby. As a kid, I had childhood asthma, and so by the time I was about 12, I realized that I started needing to use something other than pharmaceuticals, and I was at the Common Ground Fair, and I walked into the Vina Botanicals tent, and I was given a tincture of eyebright. And so by using eyebright, I was really able to control my asthma symptoms, and I haven't used any pharmaceuticals since I was about 12 years old. So it really worked for me, but I really thought of it as a hobby more than anything else. And so when I came to COA, I was interested in political journalism and political science kind of stuff, and I really wanted to find my career when I came here, and I figured that plants wasn't a career. However, I took a great course with Nishi, Trees and Shrubs of MDI, my first term, and I realized that people actually do plants for a career, so that was pretty exciting to me. So I started pursuing that idea. And so I did an internship with medical herbalist Anne McIntyre in England a couple of years ago. And through that experience, I realized that I didn't want to treat people with plants, but I still thought plant uses was interesting. So I was trying to figure out how I would form my senior project around that great passion of mine. And that corresponded with the publication, The Plants of Acadia National Park. So this book came out about a year ago, and it's published by 4 local botanists, 2 of which are COA alum. And it's a really great book for people who are interested in identifying plants because there's an identification section and a great color photograph. So that's really helpful if you're interested in identifying plants. However, what I saw was really missing in this book was the applied knowledge. How do these plants actually relate to me as a human? So for my senior project, I chose to sort of fill in those blanks, and I had 3 major goals. The first was to preserve local knowledge from living people in these areas who know about plant uses because that knowledge isn't currently preserved. The second was to make that really accessible, especially to the general public. And the third was to encourage stewardship and conservation by drawing these connections between people and plants. So I ended up focusing on 50 plants. In order to preserve local living knowledge, I interviewed 7 different people, and these are just 6 of the 7 faces of the people I interviewed. And these included herbalists, educators, and Native people from throughout Maine and New Hampshire. And in order to make this an accessible kind of guide for the general public, I wanted to include the details that are missing in edible plant guides that are currently published. So for example, they'll say hawthorn is good for the heart, or milkweed is edible, but they won't say why hawthorn is good for the heart, what parts of milkweed are edible, and how to harvest it or how to prepare it. So I tried to include those kind of details, and I tried to include those details in narratives by telling the stories of local people. So one such story was that of a woman in northern Maine who was on a backcountry skiing trip, and she was about 4 days away from any road were any emergency to strike. And a big pot of boiling water spilled all over her leg. And so they didn't have anything to treat a burn like that, obviously, on a trip. And so they, fortunately, were in a forest of balsam fir trees. So they made a strong tea out of the balsam fir trees and were able to wrap her leg in compresses with this tea. And she was able to ski the whole time. And within a couple weeks, she'd completely healed herself of this wound and to this day has no scarring. So these are the kinds of stories that I think make people really excited about plants. Not this is the difference between a fir and a spruce, but this is how a fir or a spruce relates to me as a human. And I think the general public can really relate to their neighbors. Using their backyard plants and understanding these relationships really encourages people to cherish their local flora rather than exploit it. So there are major implications of preserving this ancient yet very current knowledge. And the first is really by drawing that connection between people and plants. When people recognize their reliance upon plants or any resource, we typically work to protect that resource. And there are countless examples of where ignorance about these relationships leads to exploitation. So that connection is really important. And secondly, sustainable livelihoods can be encouraged by having this information, primarily through knowing how to appropriately use your local resources, such as gathering your own food and medicine, reducing harsh chemical use because the weeds in your lawn might actually be good for food and really high in nutrients to help your health. So that not only decreases the amount you have to drive to the store to get food, but also decreases your visits to the doctor. So those are just a couple examples of how this really can encourage sustainable livelihoods. So recognizing and preserving this kind of information about our current reliance on this traditional yet very contemporary knowledge can lead to appropriate stewardship if we can present it in a manner that's tangible and exciting, not only to the scientific community, but also to the general public. So that was really my goal for this project. And so what's next for me? I intend to get this project published within the upcoming months, and by the end of June, I'll have it all set and ready to send off to publishers. And I already have a foreword from an ethnobotanist, Nancy Turner, from the University of Victoria in British Columbia. So that's what's up for me. And my acknowledgements are here. Thank you so much.